So this is an 18-year-old boy who presented with palpitations and shortness of breath of 3 months duration. On examination, the boy had a high volume pulse with a rate of around 110. Blood pressure was 110 by 40 millimeters of mercury. GBP was raised with a prominent A wave, and a continuous murmur was heard over the right third intercostal space. This was his ECG. I'll just brief it. Shows a heart rate of around 110 with LVH and features of right ventricular hypertrophy or right-sided overload as well. So it is biventricular hypertrophy. This is his X-ray, and this was the echo. The left-sided one is the apical four-chamber view, which shows dilated chambers and normal LV function. The RARV is also, the RARV also appears a little dilated. LV also is a little dilated maybe. And this is the PLAX view, parasternal long axis view. Again, we can see an enlarged RV here. This is the color interrogation across the aortic valve in the PLAX view. We can see there is an abnormal flow turbulence in the diastole, which is not exactly draining into LV. Some amount of it is draining into LV, but we can see that there is a color flow turbulence here. The short axis view. Sorry. Yeah, so this is the parasternal short axis view. You can see that the RV is definitely dilated, and there is some amount of pericardial effusion. Otherwise, the LV function seems adequate. This is PSAX at the aortic valve level. Again, the RA is dilated, and if we closely observe, we can see that the sinuses are dilated, especially the non-coronary sinus of the aortic valve is dilated. This is the color interrogation. And here it is clearly demonstrated that the blood flow from here is going into RA. So this is basically a ruptured sinus of Valsalva aneurysm, which is draining into RA and which is leading to the pressure overload on the RA side. Here, if we just freeze here. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, here we can clearly see this is the RSOV, which is rupturing into the RA. The windsock, yes. The dimensions of the skin. So a brief about ruptured sinus of Valsalva. It is more common in Asians with a male preponderance of 3:1. They are the aneurysms as such are mostly asymptomatic. Only when they rupture they cause the manifestations. Most common sinus is the right and followed by the non-coronary. The left coronary cusp or the left coronary sinus is the least commonly involved. They usually rupture into RV or RVOT, sometimes into RA, but very less commonly into the left-sided chambers. They have associated AR in 40 to 50% of cases, and VSD is associated in 40% of cases. Ruptures are many a times precipitated by heavy exertion or chest trauma, and they have acute symptoms in 25% of cases. So what we have seen is like what we think is like RSO will always have chest pain, they'll have an acute presentation, but then that happens only in 25% of cases, and almost 20 to 25% of cases will be asymptomatic, and they may have gradual onset or progression of dyspnea and palpitation as this boy had. The echo features will have dilated chambers into the chamber in which the rupture drains. Will have an aneurysm before rupture. The windsock, what's correctly pointed. It is usually confirmed by color Doppler. It is difficult to assess the right-sided pressures because of the ARZ, and associated lesions like VSD and AR will mostly be found. TE, the transesophageal echo, in this case improves imaging quality and it supplements the transthoracic imaging. Just the schema, the picture, just to understand the anatomy and the drainage of the coronary cusps. This is a transthoracic image, the parasternal short axis view at the aortic level. This is the LA, this is RA, this is RV, this is RVOT, the pulmonary valve and the pulmonary arteries. This is the aortic valve, the three cusps, the non-coronary cusp, which is corresponding to the interatrial septum, the right coronary cusp, which corresponds to the RVOT, and the left coronary cusp, which corresponds to the LA. So the most commonly ruptured cusps are the RCC and the NCC. So obviously they'll be draining more commonly into the right-sided chambers, and the left is the least commonly encountered. The same thing depicted by a transesophageal picture. So it will be reversed because it images from the behind the mediastinum, posterior mediastinum from the esophagus. The RCC, the NCC, and the LCC. It remains the same. Corresponding to the IAS is the NCC. To the RV side, RVOT is the RCC, and this is the LCC. Definitive management is surgical repair or RSOV closure with a resection of the aneurysmal sac, and percutaneous closure with a device can also be done. Just a angiographic view of the same case. We can see that the RSOV, this is the aortogram in the PA view, RSOV which is draining into RA and opacifying the right sided things, and it is sealed off by a device. Coming to the second case, he's a 38 years old male patient with a marfanoid habitus, a hypertensive since 5 years on treatment. He presented with acute onset chest pain, which was radiating to back. After coming to the ER, he suddenly collapsed. On examination, BP was 210 by 120 millimeters of mercury with unequal pulses. ECG was sinus tachycardia with some non-specific STD changes, but the patient can also have subtle inferior wall ischemia changes, or patient may have just deep STD depressions. This is another ECG, so it doesn't resemble with the patient, but this again was recorded from one of other similar cases. It has diffuse STD changes. So this is the echo. This is the parasternal long axis view. As I mentioned earlier, that the patient had marfanoid habitus. So what we usually find with them are degenerated mitral and the aortic valves along with aortopathy. We can see here that the mitral valve also has myxomatous degeneration and the aorta is dilated. And what is clearly nicely seen here is the flap of the aortic dissection here. The color interrogation in the PLAX view of the same image. You can see severe AR and the flow across the flaps as well. Short axis view at the aortic, So short axis view at the aortic valve level. You can see the degenerated aortic valve leaflets and the flaps going from here. And the color interrogation of the same. Apical 4-chamber view on the left side with the color interrogation on the right side shows a dilated LV with globally reduced LV systolic function and some trivial MRs. So though the mitral valve was degenerative, but patient didn't have significant MR. This is a suprasternal view of the aortic arch, which nicely demonstrates the aortic dissection flap here. The color interrogation across the same. So the next step in management would be IV nitroprusides or NTG beta blockers, and patient will need emergency surgery as the ascending aorta was involved and patient had severe AR. A brief about aortic dissection. DVAK classified them into type 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 usually involve the ascending aorta and the aortic valve is involved. Type 3 usually involves only the descending aorta, so it may not be an emergency situation, but types 1 and 2 are usually emergency they lead to emergency situations. Again, if the involvement of ascending aorta is there, it is classified as type A, and type B is only descending aorta. So a few routine indications of transesophageal echo in clinical practice. They are used for better anatomic description of vegetations or mass which are not well visualized in the transthoracic imaging. Left atrial appendage clot before cardioversion for AF is one of the most common indications. Again, aortic dissection or RSOV, as we have seen. If the picture is not so clear as in these images, we might have to subject the patient to transesophageal imaging. They are better used for paravalvular leak, for atrial septal defect rim, defining the rims and ascertaining the suitability for device closure. TE is better used, and to define PV drainage. Obviously, intraoperative monitoring during valve repairs, also TE is used. Coming to a third case, this is a 23-year-old lady who had exertional dyspnea and fatigue, class 2 to 3 for the last 2 years. She had 2 episodes of hemoptysis over the last 6 months. She was evaluated for pulmonary TB outside, extensively evaluated, was negative. So she was diagnosed elsewhere as idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension. She was started on pulmonary vasodilators. Upon arrival, she was cyanosed. Saturation was 85% in all the 4 limbs. She was clubbed and she had a loud P2 with grade 2/6 pansystolic murmur, which was heard in the lower sternum wall. So basically features of PH with cyanosis. This was the X-ray and the ECG. X-ray again shows pulmonary hypertension with normal sized cardiac cilia, and ECG again depicts our predominant RV forces. So again, pulmonary hypertension kind of features. 2D echocardiogram had normal cardiac chambers, no evidence of intracardiac shunts, and since the patient was on pulmonary vasodilators, currently she had normal pulmonary anatomy. But this was one thing which we found abnormal on the ECG. This is the IVC, the subcostal view. The IVC was dilated and the portal veins were dilated with some flow turbulence here in the portal vein. So in this cases, okay, first let's go to the clinical importance of IVC in echo. IVC is very, very important to assess the hemodynamics. It guides us on fluid therapy. In tamponade, usually the IVC will be dilated and non-collapsing, and the respiratory variation, which is normally present. Normally IVC collapses with inspiration, but in RV failure or cardiac tamponade, the IVC will be non-collapsing. Just since we have come to IVC, one more picture of IVC and a surprise in IVC. Yes, this was a 70 years male who presented with pulmonary thromboembolism, and the IVC showed a large thrombus. Patient was lysed for pulmonary embolism outside without probably this would have been missed, or this could have occurred later on. Later on, this patient was found to be renal cell carcinoma with thrombus extending right from the renal vein to the IVC and pulmonary embolism as well. So coming back to the previous case, since this patient had abnormal flow turbulence across the portal vein and IVC, we wanted to rule out pulmonary AVMs to make sure that they are not the cause of cyanosis. So what we did was a saline contrast echo. We'll come to the details of saline contrast echo in a while. Normally the agitated saline, when it is injected in the right in the venous system, it goes to the right side of the heart, and in absence of any intracardiac or extracardiac right to left shunts, it will not opacify the left-sided chambers. But here, this is a very short clip, but after a few cycles, say 8 to 10 cardiac cycles, we had seen the appearance of agitated saline in the left-sided chambers, but there was no obvious shunt across the interatrial or interventricular septum. This patient was later proven to be PAVMs. So the lesion that we saw here in IVC was an Abernethy malformation. So this was an Abernethy malformation, which is extrahepatic portosystemic shunt. So what is contrast echocardiography? It is widely used, well-tolerated, non-invasive technique of employing ultrasound contrast agents to improve image quality. It exploits the ultrasound properties of microbubbles. In this case, it was agitated saline. And we can also have artificially made PFC, perfluorocarbon-based contrast agents. These contrast agents do not cross the endothelium into the interstitium, and they should not be confused with the iodine-based contrast used for radiological imaging. The simplest ultrasound contrast is the agitated saline or the saline microbubbles. The simplest way is using a 3-way stopcock, two syringes. Say this 10 cc syringe filled with 9.5 cc of saline and 0.5 cc of air. And when it is agitated between the two syringes, it will create microbubbles. And when they are rapidly injected into the vein, they will appear on the right side. The size of these microbubbles precludes the passage through the pulmonary capillaries, and they will normally be seen only in the right-sided chambers. If these saline microbubbles appear in the left-sided chambers, this implies that there is some pathological right to left shunting, either intracardiac or extracardiac. This is the normal appearance of the saline contrast. Here you can see this is intensely opacified right RA and RV, but we don't see any appearance of these saline contrast in the left-sided chambers. Within 3 to 5 cycles, if this saline microbubbles appear in the left side, they usually imply PFO or ASD or a VSD. And if it appears after 10 to 15 cardiac cycles, it is usually an extra cardiac right to left shunt, which was PAVM in the previous case. Newer generation of perfluorocarbon-based contrast agents can cross the pulmonary capillary bed, and they can be used to image the left-sided structures as well. They are used basically for differentiation of LV clot or mass from artifacts and better delineation of LV dimensions and geometry and assessment of LV systolic function when the view is not adequate. Coming to the next case, this is a 25 years old male with a history of fever since 5 days associated with chest pain localized. The pain increased on deep inspiration. Patient developed dyspnea since 2 days and class 4 since 1 day. Presented to ER with tachycardia, tachypnea, raised JVP and hypotension. BP of around 100 by 70. So this was the X-ray, huge cardiomegaly, and the ECG here. Anybody who has worked in ER or someone who can say what is the next step of management? Yes, this is pericardial effusion, large pericardial effusion. So make sure that you don't give Lasix in such cases. If IV diuretics was given in this case, and the patient worsened and went in cardiogenic shock. So when done echo, this was the image, large pericardial effusion with, we can see RARV collapse here. Some other picture. This is a different case, but different images of pericardial effusion here. You can see this is RV diastolic indentation here. The IVC, as we have discussed earlier, is always dilated in cardiac tamponade and non-collapsing. Any patient with pericardial effusion, and if we are suspecting tamponade, but if the IVC is collapsing, that basically rules out cardiac tamponade. Echo features of tamponade, diastolic collapse of RRV, inspiratory increase in RV dimensions, dilated IVC with a blunted respiratory variation, that is, it is non-collapsing, increased tricuspid and pulmonary velocities, premature closure of aortic valve or it may fail to open. Coming to the final case, this is a 72 years old male, hypertensive diabetic since 5 years, presented with history of angina on exertion since 2 years and dyspnea since last 2 months. On examination, pulse was low volume and slow rising. There was an ejection systolic murmur in aortic area radiating to carotids. ECG was LVH with strain. So this was basically aortic stenosis. So this was the echo finding. This is the parasternal long axis view. Shows calcified aortic valves and concentric LVH. This apical long axis view shows some LV systolic dysfunction. LV EF would be around 40%. Right? But then there is no definite regional wall motion abnormality, but the LV function was low. So what would be the next step? Yeah, the echo showed gradient of 62 by 36, moderate AS and EF of around 40%. So this was low flow, low gradient AS. The next step in evaluation would be stress echocardiography or dobutamine stress. Or so upon dobutamine stress echo, the AV gradient increased to 102 by 57, EF of 60. The contractile reserve was hence 20%. So again, this showed that the AS was severe. LV dysfunction was a cause of falsely low gradients. And since the contractile reserve was good, the patient will have good prognosis after surgery. So low flow, low gradient AS, dobutamine stress echocardiography has a great role in defining pseudo-severe AS from true severe AS. A brief about stress echocardiography, dynamic evaluation of cardiac structure and function during physical exercise or pharmacological simulation of exercise by increased heart rate and cardiac output and myocardial oxygen demand is what makes up stress echocardiography. They are basically used to evaluate for myocardial ischemia, viability, and valvular dysfunction. Compared to PET and SPECT, as we have seen, they are low cost, they are environment friendly, they don't use ionizing radiation, and almost equally accurate. Comparing physical and pharmacological stress, always exercise-induced physiologic stress is preferred. It helps in assessment of functional capacity and symptom reproducibility as well as the stress echo. But in patients who are unable to exercise, pharmacological stress is used. Dobutamine is the most commonly used agent. Others like adenosine can be used. Physical stress by treadmill or bicycle ergometry. Treadmill is again preferred. We can also know the exercise duration and tolerance. We can reproduce the symptoms. We can see the heart rate and BP response to exercise and exercise-induced arrhythmia, which may not be possible with dobutamine. But then exercise may have these drawbacks. Yeah, I'll speed up. Okay. Exercise has these drawbacks, which are circumvented by pharmacological stressors. The ischemic cascade. With increasing magnitude of ischemia and duration of ischemia, we have initially perfusion abnormalities, which are better picked up by nuclear imaging. Then we have diastolic dysfunction. Then we have systolic dysfunction, which is picked up by echo. And then we have ECG changes, and finally, patient will have angina. Dobutamine acts on beta and dopamine receptors to increase myocardial contractility and heart rate. The sensitivity is around 83 to 90%, specificity of 86 to 90% for detection of CAD. And for detection of viability, though less sensitive and specific compared to nuclear imaging, but still it is fairly accurate. Yeah. This is the normal contractility with dobutamine. Usually the size in systolic dimensions increase. At low dose, if it increases and further increases at a higher dose, this is the normal response. Initially at low dose, it increases, but in presence of flow limiting ischemia, it decreases at higher dose. So we can see that initially it increases and then it decreases. This is a classical biphasic response on dobutamine stress echo. In hibernating myocardium, it increases and stays increased even at high dose. So this suggests hibernating myocardium. In presence of hibernating myocardium with ischemia, again it falls down.